Season. It is a Thursday Locked On Syracuse podcast, and today we're talking all things Buddy Boeheim. He is the star player on this team. It's his last year. It's his senior season. How good is he going to be for Syracuse this year? Is he getting the All-American hype for good reason? We'll dive into what we expect from Buddy this season and what it means for Syracuse. It's all coming up on the Locked On Syracuse podcast.
You are Locked On Syracuse, your daily podcast on the Syracuse Orange, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome on in, and thank you for making Locked On Syracuse your first listen every single morning, every single weekday. We're here with you guys. Great time to subscribe to the pod right now, which is free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Also on YouTube, you can subscribe to us there. We'll be dropping some bonus content on the YouTube page all throughout basketball season. And this episode of Locked On Syracuse is brought to you by McDonald's. Proudly serving communities since 1965 now, McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's an unofficial community center. A big thank you to our friends at McDonald's for always being there. I'm loving it. So talking all things Buddy Boeheim today on the podcast. Tim, Leonard, and Tyler Aki here with you as usual. And this is the big question, I think, around this team. We've been doing these 10 thoughts. We've been counting them down. I think this is our 7th of 10 thoughts, if I'm adding them up correctly.
I haven't been counting, so
yeah,
I'm going
right.
to go with your 7th. Yeah, we've got one today and then a couple tomorrow.
And then I think Monday our plan. Okay, this is 8. Yeah, I just can't do math. That's my Syracuse education showing math. There.
Yes,
right. But I wasn't. I stayed away from the finance and the accounting stuff at Syracuse.
Dude, I haven't taken a math class since high school. I haven't even been asked to do math since high school. I don't think.
Wasn't there one class we had to take, one statistics course?
I had it past AP credits. I didn't have to take math in college.
Look at you. Dang, I should have done that. Although I wouldn't have probably passed the class in high school anyway. But okay, so enough of our math skills. So
we are this is 8 of stats 10 for Buddy later on.
Yes, we
might
will.
Be an exercise for us, given our math,
right?
Our math we're just snafus out of the gate.
Exactly. So we'll project his stats at the end. I think we start this conversation with the simple question that everyone's kind of asking. Will Buddy be an All-American this season? He's popping up on a lot of preseason All-American lists. And it's interesting, right? Because last year, if you take a look at his season as a whole, he's pretty far away from being an All-American player. Although it was a good season and he averaged almost 18 points as a whole, he was also in the middle of the season talked about as being played too much. And we had a lot of people who listened to this podcast criticizing his game. Then in his last 12 games, he averaged 22 points. We know what happened. He took over. So the question becomes, is he going to pick up where he left off and continue to average like 22 points per game and be an All-American? Or is he going to fall somewhere kind of in between those two phases that we saw last year?
Well, it comes down to how much, I think, did COVID impact him last season?
Yeah.
I think that's the big question right now for Buddy Boeheim, because remember, he was off and on. He was in that weird situation. He probably got hurt the most by it last year. Not only did he have it, but he also was in the protocol because he was close contact with I forget who the walk-on was at the beginning of the season. So he had to miss the Rutgers game. And that's a big deal when you're a shooter and you're going off and on like that. But then he kicks it into gear. Final 12 games of the season, 1.5 months is what it comes out to be. He averages 21.5 points, 4 3-pointers made per game, 3 rebounds, and he's shooting 50, 46, 83. For those who don't know, 50% from the field, 46% from 3, 83% from the free throw line. Those are impeccable numbers, and if he does that, it's no contest. He's going to be an All-American. It's just a matter of which team he lands on, first or second at that point.
Yeah, I think I'm a little more on the side of, I don't think I see him finishing as a first All-American, or I'm buying the Kool-Aid that much. Like, I had the Athlon magazine in front of me the other day. I picked it up from the local CVS down here. And
look at you.
Yeah, and it's a bummer because now I got to stare at like Duke and Coach K because I'm down in North Carolina on the cover. I'm sure Buddy's on the cover up north, but I picked up that magazine and I opened it up, and Buddy is the 6th best player in their top 100 list in the country, all players, which I thought was kind of funny because then they ranked the top 10 shooters in the country, and he didn't crack that list, which if he's the 6th best player,
Okay.
isn't he going to be a top 10 shooter? That sort of confused me, but I just don't see him ever getting to that level. And that's not to say that I don't think he's going to have a very solid year for Syracuse. I just think that's basing too much off of the tournament, which was a very, very hot stretch. And I think it's somewhat sustainable, but I just don't think he's going to be shooting like 45% for an entire season from three.
Well, the thing is yes, the tournament stretch obviously stands out, but I think it extends a little bit beyond that too, because I mean, the ending stretch of ACC play, the ACC tournament. I mean, I gave you the sample size from a 12-game stretch there. It's a pretty significant sample size at the end of the day
Yeah.
there, 12 games. And let's keep in mind, one of his worst games in that 12-game stretch, actually, if you look at it, I think it was his worst game of that 12-game stretch, happened to be in the tournament against Houston. I think he only had like 12 points in that game. So that game in particular really brings down some of the numbers that he had. Now, he was being locked up. Can't really blame him. That was probably the toughest defensive assignment he faced all season long, but he's going to have to do well against some of these really tough defensive assignments. You know, it was interesting. I went to his basketball reference page, and I mean, everyone who's like sports has been to a basketball reference, baseball reference, football reference page. And sometimes you're going for the numbers, the weird nicknames that they give certain players in the pros, whatever it is. But the one thing that I noticed when I went to he has one accolade to his name for the entirety of his career, one accolade to his name. And it's the 2021 ACC All-Tournament team, which I found fascinating. Like, that's a pretty big jump to be going from a guy who, I mean, especially for someone who's not a freshman, because obviously the freshman page is barren and then it ultimately gets to all those accolades. But to go from someone who has pretty much no accolades to their name, to all of a sudden an All-American type of player, that's a pretty steep jump. But I'm with you. I don't know if he's the first team. I don't think he is. Now, if he puts up the numbers that he did over the final month and a half, I think you'd be hard pressed to not find him on a first team. But I'm with you. He's probably not a first teamer, but I think he's definitely going to find himself on a second team.
Yeah, I'm not that confident in it. And I hate to be like a Debbie Downer about
You're saying
it.
like he's not going to be first, second, or third.
I think it's like 50-50. He's on an All-American team this year. And
I do think he gets a slight bump with who his dad is. And being a senior. I think all that stuff sort of weighs in. Any sort of 50-50 thing is going his way.
It's just interesting to me how much the tournament run has changed his, and it should, because gosh, that was an incredible week or two.
He was one of the 5 best players. Yeah, he was one of the 5 best players in the country during that stretch.
Right. And look, I think he works incredibly hard. I think he's going to have a very good season this year. But we're talking about, as you said, someone who wasn't even sniffing an All-ACC team last year. Like, he wasn't an honorable mention.
Alan Griffin was ahead of him.
Yeah, like Quincy was third team. Alan Griffin got some honorable mention votes, and Buddy was, not even really in the conversation. No one saw the All-ACC teams last year and was like, oh my gosh, like how Buddy's a top snub or something.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a talking point, right? And he averaged 18 points per game last year. So is he going to average 20 this year? Maybe. Like, I don't know if he's even going to average more than 18, given what I've seen in the exhibition and how we just have a lot of weapons on offense that they're moving the ball very well and everything. And Jim Boeheim said that he wants him to shoot it a little bit more. I kind of agree with that. But look, I just think that making that much of a leap is sort of unprecedented. And I just think it's odd that he's being pegged as the 6th best player in the country when he wasn't even an all ACC guy last year. And frankly, what was kind of a down spot, like Moses Wright won player of the year, and he couldn't crack a team.
So here's where the slight counter comes in, is every single year for him, he's gotten better. He's never hit the wall at some of these significant marks of his career.
Well, he hit a wall in the middle of last year, but now when you look at his hold,
when you look at,
I agree.
But as a whole, when you look at the entire season, statistically, even just eye test as well, he has never taken a step back from a whole season standpoint, which I think is significant. And now he heads into his senior season. He's pretty much at the point now where he's seen just about anything he needs to see. I mean, you talk about this all the time with quarterbacks too, that get to a certain age, like your Drew Brees, your Phillip Rivers, your Peyton Mannings, Tom Brady's. They've seen everything that they need to see at this point. Now it's just going out and executing and responding to different situations. I think that's the stage he's in right now as a college basketball player. And that's an exciting thing because it's not as much game planning. It's more muscle memory with him. And as a shooter, that's a good thing, I think. And now that he's going to I don't think he's played on a team as talented as this one. I really don't. When you look at some of the surrounding help that he has with him right now, this is a really good situation for him. And I think you'll see some of the other counting stats improve. I don't necessarily know if it will be points per game, but it's an exciting time to be looking at Buddy Boeheim. And that's why I think he ultimately will be an All-American. I think he's just the 50-50 stuff, I think, leans his way. It just might come down to how many games does Syracuse win. That could be the one thing that I could see holding him back.
Right. I think back to a couple years ago, first year we sort of covered the team on this podcast. This is amazing. This is year 3 now of us talking on this podcast about Syracuse basketball. But Elijah Hughes was probably the best player in the ACC that year. He didn't get a lot of ACC Player of the Year hype because we just weren't that good. And we weren't even going to make the tournament unless we went on a run, which we started to do in the ACC tournament that year before COVID. But you got to win games in order to booster your All-American candidacy as well. But we'll continue talking Buddy Boeheim a little bit more on today's show. First, I want to tell you guys that this episode is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's has always been more than just a place to get tasty, affordable food. It's a place where friends and family can come to reconnect, a place where classmates can meet up for a study group, knowing they'll have dependable Wi-Fi and endless supplies of French fries and McFlurries. I always love the McDonald's French fries. So good. Win or lose, it is a place where teammates, competitors, the home team, or the away team can come to recharge. It's the place you always look forward to stopping at on a long road trip to rest your legs and refuel. McDonald's has always been one of my favorites, so head to your local McDonald's to refuel and reconnect today. McDonald's, I'm loving it. So I think I'm a little bit lower than you. I mean, I could see him being an All-American this year, but it's just a little tougher for me to visualize like him taking a big leap or something. Because
I'm with you on that. I think percentage
where does he
might
improve,
be a little bit better,
I guess, is the question to make himself.
I've got that exercise for us when we get to stats. I want to do that.
Okay.
Which stats will he improve on, and which ones has he sort of hit a cap on? We'll do that when we're projecting out the stats.
Because I've talked about how I think a progression for him could be getting to the free throw line more. Maybe that's one of your stats, but that's something that, if you're an elite player and you're drawing a lot of defensive attention, that's where you could maybe see yourself get a little bit more efficient, get a little bit more dominant at getting to the free throw line and insert your dominance on the game a little bit more in that regard. But the bottom line is he was a really good shooter at last year. He wasn't a great shooter at the start of this year. If he shoots it really good again, he'll probably be an All-American. And there's reason, I guess, to believe he's going to shoot it really good. I guess that kind of comes back to how much did COVID impact him, which I think is a pretty strong case that he just was off last year because of COVID.
Yeah, I mean, he really struggled out of the gate and still ended up shooting 38% for the season. Which to me is
there was times he was impressive. Like 29%, and we were like an ACC
early in the season.
At that point.
Yeah, it was frustrating watching him. He still had some games where he put up 20-something points, but it wasn't always the most efficient of 20-something points that he put up on the stat sheet. So I think this season you'll see more efficiency, and I don't think you're going to get the slow start out of him. We've seen a couple seasons, even his freshman season. Remember how slow that start was to the point where he got benched by his own dad? That was something. And then he came out and emerged in the ACC tournament and put together a nice little run. And that's the thing, too, is we talk about this in football all the time, like the Heisman moment. Buddy Boeheim has had the quote unquote Heisman moments throughout his career with the big shots, the banker to beat Virginia at the buzzer and the tournament runs. He steps up to the plate in the biggest moments. And that stuff matters because sure, it's cool to look at people's stats, but when you can pinpoint little moments in games that guys have on national TV too, Syracuse gets plenty of love there from playing in the ACC and being a big brand as well. if he has some of these big moments and these big games, and this year the ACC is going to be a lot better than it was last year, so more of these marquee matchups are going to matter. Like if he goes out in that final Boeheim versus K game and he steals the show, it almost feels like a lock because he's going to be doing it in front of a massive audience.
Yeah, he's going to draw a lot of attention. A lot of people didn't even realize probably who he was. They probably just knew him as a guy on the Syracuse team. And then last year, he became like a phenomenon. I mean, Buddy Buckets and everything during the tournament. That's why we're seeing a lot of this momentum carry over into these rankings. So narrowing it down now to the conference a little bit. The polls come out, ACC media polls, and we've joked about this, but somehow he gets the most votes in the all ACC first team, but by a good margin, but he was not picked as ACC preseason player of the year. I didn't have a vote this year. I know that was a spot of contention.
I never have a vote. Never do. So it doesn't matter. Don't come after me. If you want to half-hearted go after Tim, go for it. But I mean,
I don't understand that one, but I will say I don't think it's awfully likely he wins player of the year. I think it's very likely that he is a key fixture on ACC, all ACC first team or is dominating.
Would you say it's a lock? Like it feels almost like a lock. Something has to go terribly wrong, I think, for him to not be ACC first teamer.
So what about this? I think it's pretty close to a lock for me.
What's your percentage? What's your percentage on it? Let's say health is perfect the whole season.
Okay. Yeah, 85, 90%. I would say he's an all-ACC first team member. I think I would be more surprised if he didn't. I guess like it's a tough thing to try and figure out, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't make an All-American team. I would be more surprised if he didn't make all-ACC first team than that, I think. Like, I think it's pretty likely that he is on the all-ACC first team. All-American team is just another level of
That's another beast.
Really good play.
Especially this season, too, when you've got all these players coming back, whether it's COVID years, whether it's the NBA draft pool was too polluted with all these different names and stuff like that. Like, I mean, a guy like Drew Timmy's coming back. He's the best player in the country that's coming back this season. So I look at, first of all, ACC Player of the Year, I think is a much more difficult feat than All-American this year. Yeah, I don't think you could have said that last year, especially because last year the ACC Player of the Year wasn't an All-American. This year the ACC Player of the Year is going to be an All-American. I think there's no doubt in my mind about that heading into this season. So
ESPN, it's probably going to be Banchero, right?
Right.
I mean, who else is?
ESPN.
I'm pretty confident.
Did their little roundtable of guys and said who's going to be ACC Player of the Year, and Paolo Banchero swept the board. Pretty much anywhere you look, Paolo Banchero sweeps the board, and I don't blame him. Like, the guy is a real phenomenon. Just watch him play. Watch his high school. Watch some of these early Duke games, exhibition, the blue and white scrimmages. This is going to be like a Zion 2.0 sort of season when you accompany it with the buzz of the Coach K retirement tour. He's going to get all eyes, and whether or not it's fair when the final voting comes down, at the end of the day, he's going to have his chance to show out in a lot of big games, and I'm with them. I think that Banchero is going to win this. Now, here's one thing. 3 freshmen have won this award ever in the history of the ACC. But the funny thing is, all 3 of them have been since 2015 in the one-and-done era. Not only are they Duke, but they're Duke big men, too. Yeah. It's Jaleel, it's Marvin Bagley, and it's Zion. So Banchero just kind of fits that mold of the outlier here.
Yeah, Duke still can't ever win the ACC regular season, though, but that's a whole nother topic. I just don't understand why every year they're picked first when they haven't won it since like 2010. But I do think it's going to be unlikely for him to win ACC Player of the Year. I mean, we're talking about in a season that would mean probably 22 points per game, probably Syracuse is a top 4 team in the ACC, probably hitting 40 to 45% of his threes at a very high volume. And at a certain point, it's like, I don't know if he has that level in him. I think we can all agree that he's a better player right now than many of us anticipated.
Yes.
And he's a shooter that has, like, you're known for being a shooter. It's just you get to that? Like, is there another level that he can tap into that he hasn't already tapped into? And that's my question.
Right. So here's kind of the competition. If we're going to assume Banchero is going to win this thing, right? Here's some of the other names in the fold. Like, can Buddy finish second in the voting? It's going to be Buddy, Kiva Luma from Virginia Tech, Armando Bacot, UNC, Prentice Hub from Notre Dame. And then there's always 2 to 3 names that kind of come out of the woodwork too and enter the conversation at the end of the year. Can he finish second? I look at that competition there, and I think he certainly can. I really do. I think he can finish second in the ACC because he's probably he very well could lead the ACC in scoring this year. Would not shock
I think
me.
Isaiah Wong has a good shot of that. For Miami.
Just because there's no other help there. He's going to be. It's kind of like what Elijah Hughes was being asked to do a couple seasons ago when he led the ACC. And John Mooney, I think, did he lead the ACC in
he was
scoring?
Up there, yeah.
But yeah, he's certainly up there. So it's one of those situations all over again. But I do think he certainly can because he's going to be asked to do a lot. B, he's going to score a lot. And C, he's going to do what every single pundit loves nowadays. Hit 3 balls. He's going to do all of that this year for Syracuse, and I think it's kind of the perfect formula. Unfortunately, it seems like there's a generational talent that's standing in front of him.
I guess I'm just not all the way there on the fact that he's going to be asked to do a lot as well. Maybe that's part of my hesitancy to say he's going to be a confident All-American guy. I think there's a world where he averages like 15, 16 points this year, and we're very good on offense, and he just sort of isn't shooting a ton.
It's almost like a healthier 15, 16, like a healthier 15, 16 points, which statistically, counting wise, is worse than a season ago, but you feel better about it. Like his 15 to 16 for this team is better than the 17, 18 for last year's team.
Yeah. But we'll dive into the actual stats that we're projecting in just a second. Want to remind you guys, though, that BetOnline.ag is back and better than ever. A new web interface for the start of basketball season. More props, more odds, more lines than ever before. It remains your number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. Head over to their new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use our promo code. That's Locked On to receive that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all your favorite sports. Again, the promo code is Locked On for that 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Totally free to sign up at BetOnline, where the games start. So projecting his stats now, this is interesting because from what we've seen so far, he hasn't led the team in scoring in these 2 little exhibition games. He also left one game very early in the second half because he rolled his ankle. Seems like he's totally fine. If he stays healthy, he's going to lead the team in scoring. I'm pretty confident in that. And we talked about it, like his 3-point percentage has progressively gone up each year. It was 35 as a freshman, 37 as a sophomore, 38 last year, despite that rough start. I could see it going up to the 40% range this year, despite having a lot of volume. I don't know if his points per game is going to go much higher than 17 and a half or 18, which it was pretty much last year.
So looking across the board, I mean, you look at his stats year after year after year, pretty much every number has gotten better each season. That's a really good sign. Credit to him, credit to the coaching staff, credit to Eric Devendorf too for working out with him as well and getting him into this sort of rhythm and effectiveness too. So let's do a little exercise here. What's going to cap off now? Like, what has he peaked at statistically? Well, we can start with points. 17.8. Do you see that number going up this year?
Put it this way. I think if betonline.ag set an over-under at that number, I'd be very torn, right? Like, that's about what I think is his hypothetical over-under, 17 and a half, 18 points. So I would say if it does go over, it's slightly over. Like, I don't know if we've definitely hit the cap.
Like 18 and a half.
Yeah, but we've kind of hit a cap, more or less, in my opinion.
Okay. I wouldn't be shocked if it goes over here. I just think the complementary help is going to space things out for him a little bit more. I still think the shooting volume is going to be there. Like, sure, Syracuse is bringing in guys like Cole and Joe, but they're also losing a lot of shooting volume as well. When you talk about Alan Griffin, Quincy, like those guys were taking a lot of shots too for that Syracuse team. So I still think he's going to have about the same amount of volume, and I just think he's going to make more shots because there's better shooters surrounding him now.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's definitely like there's a give and a take there. The fact that there are other shooters, there was that first year that he sort of came onto the scene with Elijah, where there were times that Elijah was out and he had to draw a lot of defensive attention.
And he struggled.
Yeah, he struggled because he was the main guy. As much as even in the tournament, teams really started to key in on him. And I think Houston just had the right guy in Dejan Giroux to guard him and get up in his grill. Leaky Black was that type of defender for him that gave him fits a couple times against UNC, at least in the first half one time, I think. But it's still tough to totally take him out of the game. Like, he's a complete player now, and he's done a nice job of getting to his spots in the 2-point range now that it's pretty much impossible to negate him entirely.
We talked about it last year. Can he be the alpha, right? Because that sophomore season when he was running alongside Elijah Hughes and when Elijah would miss time, when he was asked to be the alpha, he couldn't. He just flat out couldn't. He struggled against, I think it was that NC State game really comes to mind. There were games where he was just shut down. Miami's another.
Which was just a couple games, but yeah.
Right. But when he was asked to step up and be the guy, it was oftentimes Gerard that was the one that actually stepped up and was the better player scoring-wise between the two. But last year, I think he completely changed the narrative surrounding that. I think when he was asked to be the alpha last year, especially in the final 12, 15 games of the season, he delivered nearly every single time. And you can't take that away from him. He has flipped the narrative about him and his ability to step up in big games and be the guy.
Right. I think other stats to look at here. So if I were to say over under 3-point percentage, let's call it 39.5. Are you going over?
Yeah, I am, because I think there's better shooting surrounding him this year. When you look at Cole, Benny, all these guys, just having playmakers all around him, I think he's going to be set up for a ton of open shots this year. I expect to see that 3-point percentage in the 40s this year, especially with the way he like I read the numbers, last 12 games, 46%.
Right.
Almost 50% from three. That's unbelievable.
Taking a lot. I mean, he was so good at the end of last year.
And he's shooting 38. I mean, that to me is unbelievable. I think he's going to shoot about 8 per game again this season. And if he can get that number from 3 to 4, I mean, I certainly think he can. I think the help is there. I think Cole Swider is going to work numbers for Buddy's for all of his percentages across the board. His presence out there on the wing is going to do a lot.
I would like to see, in order for him to be a true All-American this year and sort of like prove me wrong and be a first-team All-American, he would have to be 40% or more from 3, which I think is very possible. I think I would even probably take the over as well in 39.5. But also the free throws, like I talked about, getting to the line more. And then just the little statistics have to probably go up just a little bit. Like the rebounds, he's got to be a little bit better. Assists, making plays for others. That's that sort of next phase for him, which I think he's definitely doing all the things he can to get to that point. Like, we know he's working hard at it. It's just, does he really have that next gear in him? And I say all that, but I also totally recognize that he basically showed he had that next gear for 12 games last year when it mattered most. So you have to give him a lot of credit for that.
I look at, too, the 2-point percentage for him. It's gone up every single year. 44% as a freshman, 46, and then last year was 49. That elbow jumper where he's shooting over the top of guys because he's a 6'5" guard. He's going to have that luxury again this year because, I mean, 6'5" in a college game as a guard, that's a pretty big height advantage that you're going to have over a lot of guys. He's going to get to
so
that
much
spot.
of his game. And I think that's why he struggled against Leaky Black and Dejan Giroux, because they were just like athletic 6'7", 6'8" guys. They could get up in him. Like Alvarado did defend him decently well from what I remember, but I was way less, even though he was ACC Defensive Player of the Year, I was less worried about that than Dejan Giroux.
Right. And I think we even crunched the numbers then. Like Alvarado still struggled a little bit when he went up against some of the bigger guards in the conference. That's when you saw teams have success against Georgia Tech. And Buddy was one of those guys where, listen, he's a bigger guard. He can shoot over the top because Alvarado was what, 6'1". He wasn't the biggest guy out there. Yeah. He just was technically very, very sound. So I look at this. I thought about You know, you hear this a lot in the NBA with Steph, and it gets thrown around from time to time in college too, but the 50-40-90 club. Is
Hmm.
that something Buddy can attain this year? For reference, he was 38% from three last year, 43% from the field, and then he was 85% from the free throw line. During that final 12-game stretch, he was 50, 46, and 83. Do you think he
Yeah.
could get to that 50-40-90 ledger?
Gosh, I mean, there was only one guy in college basketball last year who did that. It
Yeah.
was
Trey
the name's
Murphy.
escaping me. The Rice guy from Virginia, Trey Murphy. Yeah.
Trey Murphy.
I mean, that's it.
So I looked it up. There's been 11 all time, which I thought there would probably be a little bit
Yeah,
more.
it's not
So
often.
it's not a
Right.
great, it's not, it's very hard to accomplish, but the guys that have done it, it's a pretty notable list. There's either guys you've never heard of, or it's guys like Cassius Winston, Salim Stoudemire. Those are some of the guys that have done it.
I don't think he could do it with the volume he's at. And I just think that's
yeah.
such a lofty goal because
Mhm.
like what would be a really good season would be 40 from 3, I would say 45 from the floor and 85 from the free throw line. Like if he does that, he's probably an All-American. And then you're asking pretty much like 5 more percentages on the last two that I mentioned. That's a lot. With the amount of volume he's going to be shooting, I don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. But if you look at it, like that final stretch of games, the final month and a half that he had, the one thing that was lagging behind was the free throw percentage, and it was sitting there at 83%. But outside of that, he'd gotten it, the 50% from the field, 46% from three. I think if there's a guy in college that can do it, it's him and Max Abmas that could maybe do it this
Yeah.
season. But it's certainly going to be something that's very tough to accomplish, and that's why only 11 players have ever done it. And you bring up the volume. You look at the guys that have done it that I mentioned, like Trey Murphy did it last year, but Trey Murphy wasn't guy number one on the scouting report for Virginia.
Yeah, I
Cassius
almost
Winston
weirdly think Cole Swider might have a better chance. Like I know
that's
that
a
sounds
good
kind of
call.
crazy.
Yeah, or
but
maybe even Joe too. If his
yeah,
in terms of shooting, like the volume of shots that he takes goes down significantly because he can shoot 90% from the free throw line. And like Cassius Winston, like he did it in 2018 when Syracuse knocked Michigan State out of the tournament, but Cassius Winston wasn't the Cassius Winston of his senior year. A team had Jaren
right.
Jackson and Miles Bridges on it. So you're right. I think the volume is going to prevent him from doing it, but it's certainly something that if he does that, A, he's going to be an All-American, and B, he definitely puts himself.
He's maybe National Player of the Year at that
right.
point.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm not trying to overreact.
And he could go
yeah.
blow for blow with Banchero for ACC Player of the Year too.
Sure. Yeah, and because then you'd have to imagine Syracuse is doing a lot of good things in terms of the win-loss.
They're winning
there,
games if that's happening. They're winning a lot of games and in the conversation to win the ACC at that point.
No doubt. Well, that is our buddy Boeheim podcast. That is our 10th thought on him. I think I'm going to say All-American, but a little less likely maybe than you think it is. Either way, he's going to
give me a percentage. Give me a percentage on All-American.
Oh, I said 50-50.
Right, you did say 50-50.
Yeah, I think it's like a 55% chance that he makes a team. And I say that because, as you alluded to earlier, he's a big name now. And a lot of people have put him on the preseason poll.
He's on magazine covers. He's on magazine covers. His dad is one of the titans of the sport. Like,
if he's in a tiebreaker situation, he gets the tiebreaker probably.
If him and Johnny Juzang have similar seasons, it's going to Buddy. Like it just is.
And they're similar players, right? Because Juzang did the same thing in his run last year.
Right. It's like a guy who stayed 4 years at the same school, plays for his like the storylines just favor Buddy. Everything media-wise is going to favor Buddy.
The only thing is, maybe if UCLA is legitimately a top 5 team or a top 3 team, then you'd lean to Juzang. But yeah, that's a whole nother
and again, that's kind of like what I
discussion.
said. The one thing that might work against them is how many games Syracuse wins this year.
Right. And, we just talked all about Buddy. We didn't mention his defense at all. I'm not saying that he's like a bad defender, but it's not like that's a tiebreaker for him either. And I think that matters less in college basketball than offense, of course, when we're looking at these All-American lists. But it's still worth noting that he has to be really good on offense to be an All-American this year. Like
Yeah.
he's not
And
gaining
he
points.
could do like the Trevor Cooney too, where you just get a lot of steals.
Right.
And that'll certainly help his case too. I mean, he's gone up in steals every single year too.
Yeah, and he's gone up in everything, like you said. So big things for Buddy this year. That's going to wrap our Thursday podcast. We'll be back tomorrow. Going to do some more 10 thoughts and hit on some more of the hot topics as we get you guys ready for the start of the Syracuse season. Next Tuesday is the opener.
What do we got dialed up
against
for tomorrow?
Lafayette. Let's see. What do we have.
We have a
where do they
twofer
stack
tomorrow.
up?
It's
in
the
the
non-conference,
Yep.
non-conference, and where they stack up in the ACC.
I think
There's
that's our
some
plan.
great non-conference scheduled games.
I
mean,
know. I'm jacked up.
Jimmy put
Yeah.
together a hell of a schedule this year.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to see this team in the non-conference. It's really going
Every
into the
game's
deep
gonna
end of the
feel
pool.
big. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
It's gonna be good. And we'll probably be on national TV and everything. Like, I'm just excited to be back at Battle for Atlantis. That's always been good to us, and we seem to play
I've got
well
my
there,
Battle
so, yeah.
for Atlanta stat. I'm bringing it back tomorrow.
Right. I know you are. The loyal listeners will know what we're talking about. But thank you guys for listening as always. Check out Locked On ACC and all the other great Locked On podcasts that we have all across the network as your second listen today. We're back with you guys tomorrow. If any football news comes up, we'll talk about that as well. We're still keeping an eye on the football season, but no game this weekend. So we're getting you guys ready for basketball. We'll continue our 10 Thoughts series, and we'll be back to talk to you guys tomorrow.